My paranormal experiences happen all the time. I would like to tell you about when the first one I really remember happened to my daughter. She was the age of 4, and I was going back to work. I had 2 kids, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and my husband at the time worked with someone, and his wife was babysitting in Roadhead, North Carolina. She said she would watch the kids since I was only going to work part time in the evening. So I went to meet them, and they are in this big old Victorian house. And I asked where the kids were going to be staying and such and such. And I felt comfortable with them because they had 2 daughters a little bit older than our kids. So I took them. First week went fine. The second week, I went to take my kids back, and my daughter locked the car and refused to get out because she had told me, she said, Mommy, that man upstairs talked to me. And I said, well, what man talked to you? And she said, the man in the closet. And I was like, hold on. So once I got her out of the car, we went in, and I asked Sarah what all was going on. She said, I don't know. She was upstairs playing Friday with My Little Pony Castle, and everything was going fine. Next thing I know, she comes running down the stairs and wouldn't go back up and play. And that's all I know. So I'm like, well, if my daughter at the age of 4 is locking herself in the car and she's talking about some man talking to her from the closet, I'm quitting work and I'm going back home. So I told my mom and my sister about it. So we started looking into it. My sister's best friend, Kathy, knew the owners and asked them about it and said, oh, yeah, it's haunted. There was a man that hung himself upstairs, and we started asking which room, and it was the same room that my daughter Vanessa was talked to by the gentleman in the closet. And then we found out more information about the house, and that most of the time that door is locked with a padlock. Sometimes you will go and it'll be unlocked, sometimes not locked. So that was kind of strange. Then after that, we ended up, my husband at the time, ended up going to the military. We went up to Fort Drum, New York, stayed there for 4 years. We come back, and we stayed with my mom for a little while. And then we moved to Grace Chapel, which is in Granite Falls, North Carolina. And we bought a house. And this house was so strange. It was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house with a full basement. You walk down the stairs, and it's like someone's going to grab your feet because there was no wood in between. There was 2 rooms built downstairs, and the one was completely black. I thought that was kind of odd, and I got the strangest feelings. I knew that from my grandmother that I had the gift, but I never really tried to use it. I always knew I had certain feelings and things that would come up, but okay, no big deal. I didn't think nothing about it. So at the time, my husband went to work 3rd shift. He worked from 7 in the evening till whenever he got off the next day. Well, right after we moved in, I told him, I said, there's strange things happening here. He's like, what? I'm like, well, for one, the doorbell will ring all different hours of the day, in the evening and at night. I'll go and there's nobody there. The door, somebody will knock on the door. There's nobody there. He said, oh, it's just your imaginations. You know, you have those crazy dreams, which I do have some dreams that do come true. And I'll tell you more about that in a little while. We lived there for about 2 months, and I come to him again. I'm like, look, about 2:30 to 3:15 every night, it's like someone rushes into the bedroom, starts shaking me like, oh my God, get up, something bad's happening. He said, oh, you're crazy. He didn't care to tell me, but till later, that was happening to him too, but during the day when he was sleeping. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Me and the kids will not go downstairs once it's dark. It's creepy. It's all this weird stuff, all these noises. We're seeing shadows, the toilet's flushing. I just don't like it here. He's, oh, it's okay. So we're there for a couple of years, and he gets called back for in the military for Operation Desert Storm. And before he leaves, he hooks up outside detective lights that will come on if someone goes by. And we did have some cats. He's back from our Operation Desert Storm, and we're looking out across this beautiful, beautiful sunset. We're in our bedroom, and I'm on the left side of the window, and he's on the right side of the window. And we're looking out and not saying anything because it's a beautiful sunset. And all of a sudden, a man's voice went, Wes. I looked at him and I said, Not my name. They said your name. He went and got his gun, went outside, looked all the way around the house, downstairs in the basement and everything. And I told him, I said, I'm telling you, this is a very haunted house. So many weird things goes on at night. I said, me and the kids will get scared and come in the bed with me while you're going to work. It's like someone's watching us. It's just too freaky here. It's just so crazy. So we ended up moving over to Taylorsville, North Carolina. And we buy a house that's over 100 years old. One of the bedrooms are downstairs, 2 bedrooms upstairs. We have 3 kids. Actually, I'm sorry, 4 bedrooms, 2 downstairs and 2 upstairs. And my 2 oldest kids take the bedrooms upstairs. And we're there for a couple of weeks. And they're like, Mom, something comes and sits on the bed at night. I'm like, what do you mean something comes and sits on the bed? I don't know what it is, but you need to tell it needs to go away. I don't like nothing that I can't see come and sit on my bed. I'm like, okay, well, just if it comes again, something comes and sits on the bed, just tell whatever it is to go away, that it's scaring you, and go from there. Well, that was my son telling me that. And then my oldest daughter came and said, look, it's in my room now. You got to do something. So I told her to do the same thing. And of course, you can hear footsteps going up and down the stairs. You're hearing knocks and just different strange noises that you shouldn't be hearing. And then we're out working in the yard and we find a small tombstone that has 3 initials on it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe that's what is sitting on the bed. And then my youngest daughter, about 2 months later, comes and says, Mommy, there is a little girl that keeps trying to talk to me and I don't want to talk to her. What do I do? And I'm like, just don't worry about it. Just tell her to go on. It's scaring you. And she's like, she keeps trying to talk to me, Mommy. I'm so scared. And I said, well, just tell her not to talk to you. She's scaring you. And, it keeps going on. And finally, I just sit in the living room by myself. And I'm like, I'm not sure who is here, but you're scaring all 3 of the kids. And if you need to talk to someone, you can come and talk to me. Because you've not shown yourself to me. I've just heard the noises and things around the house. And that's it. But, please, you're scaring the kids. So if you need to talk to someone, come to me. We end up moving somewhere else in Taylorsville. That's another haunted house. Or maybe just the ghosts follow us. I don't know. We have a 4-bedroom house. One's downstairs. That's my oldest daughter. And the only way to turn the lights on in her bedroom is at the top of the stairs, going down into the bedroom. But I did have a lamp down there for her. And she's down there and she starts screaming, Mama, 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 come help me. And I'm like, what's wrong? She said, nobody sit on the bed with me this time. They laid on the bed with me. I don't know what's going on, but I'm not staying back down here. So her and her brother switched rooms. Same thing happened to him. It's a constant battle. You can hear the noises, the doorbell will ring there. Always something going on. So I'm like, okay. After all that time, we moved to Hickory, North Carolina, and my then husband's grandmother's house. There's nothing there. We're good. And then I go to a paranormal conference with my best friend Robin Zima down to a Biltmore hotel in Greensboro, North Carolina. She wanted to go to it, so she come up from Georgia, and I'll meet her there. She's not made it there yet, and I'm talking to some of the other people there. It's a woman and her teenage daughter and her friend. So I'm like, hey, the accountant's office was up on the 3rd floor. Let's go upstairs and see how that's going, to see where the room is and kind of get the layout of the hotel. So we go up there. We're at the end of the hall. There's nothing behind us but a brick wall. And we're there sitting there talking and everything. And then all of a sudden, all four of us hear a conversation going on behind us at the brick wall. There's nobody there. It's only us there. And that woman's like, I've never been to anything haunted and this is freaking me out. And I'm like, no, just continue to listen and see if we can make out anything they're saying. And of course, we get, EVPs and things there while we're there over the weekend. And the first night we stay in just a regular motel room there. And then the second night we stay in the accountant's room. A ghost hunter named Patrick Burns and his wife are the ones doing this paranormal conference. And we're all in the room where the accountant, he got murdered. When there, I had gotten, me and Robin some oranges while we were down at lunch. And we had them there and we asked the spirit that was there if it could move the orange. It rolled the orange. They asked again. It moved the orange. They tested it by trying to blow on the orange. Nothing would move it. It was just one of those fantastic paranormal conferences. Later on, me and Robin and my sister Pam, we go to another paranormal conference on the USS Battleship with Chip Coffey and other ghost hunters and paranormal experts there. My sister, she's like, I know Grandma had the gift and I know you have the gift, but I don't have no gift. I'm like, well, you never know. It's hereditary. It's a gift. So we're going through, we're hearing all kinds of strange things. And we go down to the mess hall. And when you come out of the mess hall, you have all these beds that's hanging, 3, 4 on these chains. And all of a sudden, my sister just starts crying and says, Lisa, you've got to help them. They're so sad. They want to go home. And she's just boo-hooing. Like, tell them to go to the light, do something. I'm like, what are you talking about? She said, all these soldiers are here and they're telling me, I want to go home to my family. You've got to help them. And of course, I try to tell them, go toward the light. It's safe. It's okay. And, we're going through the USS Battleship at Wilmington, North Carolina. And she's like, I've never, ever felt or heard anything like that before. It's so amazing. So I told her, I said, well, like I said, we have the gift. And she's like, I don't know. I just saw that. And I was like, well, you've seen more than that. We worked at Blowing Rock Hospital in Blowing Rock, North Carolina, near Boone, North Carolina. We worked there together. Now, it's called a hospital because they still had the ER in the basement. But actually, it was just a nursing home. And we were restorative aides. We just worked weekends. Now, this place is beyond haunted. But it was a good place that was haunted. Way back before we even started working there, and we worked there with Robin Zima, my friend that we went on the paranormal conferences with. Even before she worked there, and she worked there quite a few years before we went. Back in the day, nurses would wear the white uniforms, the white hats, and residents would still, even up to when I was working there, would see this nurse walk up and down the hall. But in Blowing Rock, we get a lot of snow, and a lot of people call out, and who's ever there's got to work. So sometimes staff is short, and who's ever's there's got to work. This has been probably 15 years ago or more. This little lady kept pressing the button and yelling, I got to go to the bathroom. Get me the potty. Get me the potty. And this went on for like 40 minutes. Finally, the CNA come in. She's like, I will take you now. I'll get you on the potty. She said, you don't have to. The nurse in the white put me on it. You can go on. When I worked there, we had a room that was empty. No bed even in it. And the call bell would go off. We'd go in and we'd unhook the call bell. And the call bell would still go off. Back in the day when it was a full-fledged hospital, a little red-headed boy had come in and he was burnt over 80% of his body. And he ended up dying there at the hospital. He stayed for a long time, but he ended up dying there. So anytime the resident starts talking about seeing the little red-headed boy, then we knew that someone was going to come up and die. And sure enough, so one of the residents would die. And it always goes in numbers of 3. And when my sister and myself would get snowed in up there, they did have an old doctor's apartment that if no one else claimed it, we could stay there. So me and Pam was staying down there one weekend. I just slept in the living room. There was 2 bedrooms, so I just slept in the living room so I could watch TV because I couldn't sleep good. I kept feeling something standing behind me. And I was like, what is going on? I know this place is haunted, but this is the doctor's lounge. We're good. Shouldn't be nobody coming down here. But of course, you know how it goes. Ghost or ghost, they go wherever they want. And I couldn't sleep the whole night because it was just so crazy there. And then we go up next morning, go to work. I'm telling one of the other CNAs. She's like, well, Lisa, that used to be the morgue. I was like, excuse me? She said, yeah, used to be the morgue. I was like, oh, well, maybe that explains some of the strange things that happened with me there. Because I couldn't sleep last night. You know, I'm always feeling like someone's watching me and looking at me, just strange feelings. We had a friend that was a CNA. Her name was Amber. And she wanted to go to the bottom of the hospital to see if we could hear any ghosts or anything. Because she's like, I kind of believe in them, Lisa, but then I kind of don't. And I'm like, well, it's okay. So we go down. We're in the lab. It's not much there. There's no lab there. It's just the office building, or the room, excuse me. And we're standing near the door, and we're not even near the towel dispenser. And it's the one that you put your hand over and automatically dispenses. And all of a sudden, it just starts dispensing towels. She jumps, screams, runs to the elevator. And I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. She's like, no, it's not. It's not. I'm like, girl, it's okay. And then if you do get to work in the ER, every once in a while, I would fill in as the check-in person. They'll tell me all kinds of different things. And it did happen. They'd have the automatic doors, nothing there in front of them, just automatically open and close, open and close. You'd hear people walking down the hall and nobody there. It was a good haunted hospital. It was never nothing bad. And I enjoyed working there with all the different people. So now let me tell you about my Wilkesboro Paranormal conference that we went to, Robin and myself. Now, at this time, I'm opened up. I sense things. I can read people. People can talk to me and ask me questions, and I can see what they're talking about and different things. Robin's the scientific type. She has to feel, see, be proven that, you know, she loves ghost hunting, but that's just her take on it. So we're going into Wilkesboro, and they have all these different properties that they do tours on. They do ghost tours in October, but they have a big paranormal conference. So we go. It's great. The Smitty Hotel in North Wilkesboro is very haunted. Mr. and Mrs. Smitty own the hotel, and then they own the store down below. And there has been numerous people that has seen Miss Smitty sweeping the porch. There's a upstairs porch that she always sweeps and cleans. And then at one time they had a restaurant. The kitchen was upstairs and some of the dining area was downstairs. And there was 2 people that come to work, and the one lady was downstairs, and she was setting all the silverware because they didn't, you know, there was no plastic or anything. They set the tables. You come sit down. It was awesome. She said she kept hearing a lady tell her, you've missed a fork. Do it right. You missed a fork. You placed it wrong. You missed the fork. So she goes upstairs, and she's like, why did you keep hounding me about me missing a fork and placing the fork wrong? And the girl looked at her like, I ain't been downstairs. And she's like, what? What are you talking about? She said, somebody was just talking to me downstairs. So Miss Mitty is really hands-on in even though she's been dead 30-some years. You can still hear people walking up and down the stairs there at the hotel. There is a bar down below, and they do get action there. But where we got our most action is on down about a half block is this big, white, old plantation house. And in the back is slave quarters and part of the kitchen and the smokehouse. Part of the kitchen got burned up in a fire, but still have some of it stands. So it was mine and Robin's turn to go in the slave quarters. And let me explain something about this slave quarters. You open the door, and behind the door, there's some kind of writing. Well, University of Louisiana come and documented that that was a curse on the plantation owner. And they have the house owners there have the documents that it was a curse on the plantation's owner from the slaves. So there was 2 bales of hay, and it's nighttime, completely dark in there. When you walk in the door, to the left is a raised up fireplace, and to the right is it's probably 6 by 10 room. There's a window, and the hay bales were sitting in front of the window, and the fireplace is to the left. Me and Robin was sitting on the bales of hay, and all of a sudden Robin screams. I'm like, what's wrong? She's like, something just touched my leg. And I'm like, where did it go? So we turned the flashlight on. There's nothing there. She's like, Lisa, something just touched my leg. She's like, it was like a dog touched my leg or something. A big dog run through, touched my leg. I said, well, it's okay. So we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, I get this vision of this lady. She's short. She's a slave, and she has a do-rag on her head and an apron, and she's cooking in the fireplace. And she looks at me and she says, they slaughtered a hog today. And she's making these little, to me it looks like hush puppies, but I know it's not hush puppies. And I'm like, okay. And she kept saying, we got the leftovers. I'm like, okay. And she's deep frying these big dough balls that look like cornbread or hush puppies. She's like, it's good. And then beside the fireplace to the right, which there's the window and there's me and Robin, she points back and I see a doorway. But there's no doorway there now. So I didn't understand what she was trying to point to. And I was like, okay. And she looks out the other window toward the front door, and she's like, it's been a good day. It's been a good day. And then she just disappears. So we go back, and we have a meetup at the end of the evening to different things that we saw and heard and things. I'm telling them about what happened, with Robin. They were like, well, there was a doorway there. That was where the bedrooms were. And then I'm like, well, the little lady I saw kept telling me, pointing that there was a doorway there. She said, yeah, that's where they all slept. I was like, oh. I said, well, she kept saying they had slaughtered a hog and they got leftovers. I said, but it looked like she was doing cornbread balls or hush puppies. They said, oh, no, they always did that with the chitlins. I was like, oh. And she said that it was a good day. And then they went on to tell me that other people have seen her and that she'll be out sweeping the dirt in the front of the little slave quarters and things. And that, numerous people have seen her. And I was like, wow, that was really interesting. And they said they always had a dog. So that's probably what Robin felt running into the room, because those there were allowed to have a dog. So Robin's tripping at this point because she's like, I felt the dog. This is so unusual. I have stories from my grandmother, and this was in Tennessee. Her and my granddaddy first was married. They lived in Tennessee. And there was a little white house, white picket fence, beautiful house. Nobody lived in it. And the saying was, if you could stay in the house from 6 p.m. till in the morning, you could have the house, land, everything would be deeded to you. My grandma said, "Oh, let's do that, Wilson." She's like, "No." He's like, "Woman, you're crazy. Something scratches you until you get out of there. I ain't going in there." She's like, "I don't know why not. It would be at the house." He said, "You're crazy, woman." But the true story on the house is that if you go in back then, something would scratch you and it'd only get harder and harder on you until you left. Numerous people had tried. Now, from my voice, you can tell I'm from the South. I'm from North Carolina, Southern as can be. And if you don't know what mill houses are, because this story contains mill housing, it's what the companies would build and charge their employees money to have them rent these houses. Just stick built houses, cheapest you can get. My granddaddy and my grandma and my mom and her brothers and sisters live in mill houses. My mama was born in 1930, lived through the Depression. So back then, everybody had one plate, one cup, a spoon, and a fork. Like if you had one of each. So they lived in the mill house. Mama would say that they would get their dinner, do their dishes, go to bed. And she said some nights you would hear a whole conversation with another family in there where the fork or the spoon would hit the plate, it would cling. You could hear them drinking and setting the glass down. All this. And she said sometimes they would get up in the mornings and the table would be set and they didn't set it. Sometimes the chairs would be all moved around, but that's just what happened in these mill houses. And it happened in, and not just one particular one, it happened in different ones because this mill houses lasted for hundreds of years. My mama actually still has one in Granite Falls, North Carolina, that's over 115 years old. That's been upgraded and everything. That just shows you what kind of history these mill houses have. If you ever heard of Henry Mills, that is a good one to look up because they're actually redoing it and it's very haunted. Henry River Mills in Hickory, North Carolina. So now I want to talk about some of the different things that I see and feel. I was at the beach with my daughter and my grandbabies, and we went out to eat. And the waitress, she was a sweetheart, but a family member that had passed on kept saying, "You need to tell her something for me." And I'm like, "You need to leave me alone. I'm on vacation. Please don't do this now." Which I didn't mind doing it. It's just, here we are in a busy restaurant. I've never charged anybody anything for a reading. If they ever needed a reading or anything, that's a God-given gift. I'm here for you if you need one. So, that aggravated the hooey out of me until I told this waitress what this grandma wanted her to know. She started crying, and I'm like, "I didn't mean to make you cry." She said, "No, no, no. Should I've been down, and I've missed my grandma, and you're a blessing." And I said, "No, we all in this world are a blessing to each other." And then a friend of my youngest daughter, Sierra, her friend's sister had passed, and they weren't exactly sure how she had passed. They knew some of the details, but they wanted more. And she came to me. I knew nothing about it. I asked her, I said, first and foremost, I asked everybody this, "Do you want me to tell you everything I see?" And she's like, "Yes." I'm like, sometimes it's not always nice. And she said, "No, I want to know everything you see." And I told her, I said, "Okay." So I'm going down a short hall. The room is white. There's a bed up against the wall. As soon as you open the door on the right-hand side going in, I said, "Your sister died from an overdose, and so did the boyfriend, both. And he's slumped over on top of her." And she said, "Yes, we know that. But do you know minutes before that?" And I said, "I do." I said, "But she knew what she was doing and the risk that she was taking, and she knew she needed help." but they both didn't know that it was bad heroin. And I wanted to tell the story because families do need closure, and they need that from psychic or mediums or whatever. I call it a gift. And I said she didn't hurt. She was not scared. She was taken on. And she said that was the closure that I needed. One other thing that really, now this one kind of flipped me out, is I went to money doctor, and he had an emergency, so I had to go to a different office. And I went in, there's like 10 people in there, and all of a sudden, every hair on my neck, arms, everything goes up. And there's like, I couldn't tell what the spirit was or what it was wanting me to say, or who it wanted me to say it to, but I could not get out of that office fast enough because it was like really pressuring me to say something, but I didn't know who to say it to. I didn't know who the spirit was. It was trying to talk to me. It was just so crazy that I was like, I'm so sorry. We'll have to meet up some other time because it was beyond. That's the only time I've really been freaked out with a spirit trying to talk to me. Other things don't bother me, but that did. I hope that anyone else that comes across a ghost or a spirit just knows that, they're just trying to get a message across. I always asked my mom when I was little, why are they ghosts? And she's like, they have an untold story that they need to tell. And that's why they're still here. And I believe that. And I hope all of you have a great day.
Our paranormal experiences have had a profound effect on our lives. I know I pay a lot more attention to the skies now after my experience than I ever have before. Hello, my name is Frank.
And my name is Paul.
Back in 1997, I came home from football practice and decided to take the dogs out because I knew my father was upstairs sleeping. He was working midnight shifts, and, he was in the bedroom with the TV going and the blackout shades. And so I take the dogs out, and, I was hot and sweaty from football practice, and it was a pretty warm night. So I checked the water in the pool, said, all right, I'll take a swim. Again, I was hot and sweaty. I'm out with the dogs, checking the water by the pool, and I just looked up and I saw a massive, what I believe was a ship or a craft. It was definitely a boomerang in shape, and it looked like it was almost semi-transparent. It was almost like it was cloaked in something like mirrors or that nature. Like if you've ever seen the movie Predator, where you could see the movement and the shape, but it's got that reflective quality to it. It was like semi-materialized, if that makes sense. Anyway, it was absolutely enormous. It was, if I had to take an educated guess, a mile wide. It was being followed by several black, what appeared to be military or government helicopters. So I was in shock and I was excited. And I took some rocks and I threw them at my father's window, which was up on the second floor of the house, knowing he was in there probably sleeping. He came to the window pretty angry, yelling at me and, saying, Frank, what the heck? You're gonna break the windows. And I said, Dad, you really need to come outside and take a look at this.
So I ran down to the backyard, and Frank pointed over in the northern sky, and he said to me, Dad, what is that? I looked up, and for a split second, I thought it was a flock of geese because it was kind of V-shaped. But then when I looked, I saw it wasn't geese. It was the shape of something enormous. It was giving off small contrails on the leading edge. This ship, I'll call it a ship for lack of a better word, was massive. It was moving very slow, and it was very low altitude. I'm going to guess maybe 3,000-4,000 feet. And it came and it flew directly over us Frank is right. If you ever saw the movie Predator, where the creature looked, you could see it move and you could see it, the edges of it, but it kind of reflected its surroundings. It was exactly like that. And I remember saying to myself, wow, this thing is either covered with mirrors or the exterior of it is like a TV screen, and they're showing images of the sky to make it blend in. My mind was frantically, I'm an engineer, so I'm trying to figure out, what I'm looking at. Then I said to myself, wow, this thing, to gauge the size of it, I remember saying it's at least as big as 4 modern aircraft carriers if you place them nose to nose. I mean, it was gigantic. As it went overhead, one end of it was on the western horizon, the other end was on the eastern horizon, and it made absolutely no noise at all. Nothing. I remember saying to myself, because I lived in Flushing when I was a child, right near Shea Stadium, and I said, wow, if there were people on this craft, easily 150,000 people could be on it, because I know Shea Stadium holds 80,000 people. And this thing was like triple the size of Shea Stadium. It was just gigantic. It was like a floating city. It went by really slow. And then we noticed it was being followed by 3 black, unmarked Apache helicopters, clearly military. And they were flying in a triangle formation. I realized helicopters were following it because a fixed-wing aircraft would fall out of the sky if it tried to go that slow. So I knew the government knew about this thing. And then the other thing that entered my mind was, this can't possibly be man-made. It has to be extraterrestrial. It's just so huge. It changed my whole life. I mean, before that experience, I was, for lack of a better term, I'd say like agnostic towards UFOs. I did not believe in them, but I didn't believe in them totally either. Of course, after seeing that, I became a total believer.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing it in broad daylight, it was just incredible. It's not like when you look up at the sky at night and you see lights. I mean, this was broad daylight, and I saw what I saw, and it was clear to me what I was seeing. It was unmistakable.
Yeah, it was truly an amazing thing. And like I said, it changed my whole outlook on things. After that, the paranormal appealed to me more. I had other experiences. In 1964, my parents had bought me a Daisy BB gun for Christmas, something was my favorite Christmas gift of all time, almost like the movie A Christmas Story. It's just like that. I wanted this BB gun so bad, and they got it for me. And I spent my entire summers in the woods. My parents had bought an old boarding house with 19 bedrooms up in Haines Falls, New York, which is in the Catskill Mountains. And that summer, I had a route I used to take every day through the woods, down past this pond in the woods, and then there was abandoned railroad tracks from the old railroad that didn't exist anymore. And this one morning, I was walking towards the pond, and there was, I wouldn't call it a swampy area, but an area that was always wet. So I never walked through it because you'd get muddy feet. But I saw tracks. Big tracks. I went over, and I'm 7 years old. And in 1964 in New York, probably nobody had ever really heard of Bigfoot. At that time, it was like a California phenomenon. And I wasn't at all familiar with Bigfoot at all. But I walked over and looked at these tracks. And they were human looking, but they were gigantic. The person was barefoot, and I knew they were made at night because I'd been there the previous day. And I said to myself, wow, a huge man went through here last night, and he had to be running because the distance between the tracks was really big. Even as a 7-year-old, I could figure that out. And it kind of scared me because the woods at night are pitch dark, and you can't run through them. You'll get your eye poked out by branches. I said to myself, wow, I mean, I just didn't know what to think. I also noticed that I started hearing wood knocks. Back then, not knowing what a wood knock was, in my mind, I said, wow, somebody is chopping a tree with an axe. I had no other way of thinking about what that sound was because it was loud. And it was coming from an area of the woods that were dense evergreens. When you're in that area, you can't see 5 feet in front of you because it's just so packed with white pines. And I remember, out of curiosity, I started walking towards the knocking, and then I heard another knocking from a different distance. And I said to myself, wow, how could two men be out in the middle of nowhere? There was no roads, no houses there. It's Catskill Park. It's wilderness. And then I got a little scared. I'm in hindsight, I'm probably glad I didn't walk over to check it out. The next day, our neighbors who lived across the street were sitting in back of their house. They had a deck that was up on the second floor. And they related to me this story. They said they were sitting out there and they heard something enormous walking in the woods. Casey, the father, went and got a flashlight. And he said when he shined it at the woods, whatever it was staying just inside the tree line, behind their backyard. And he said when he shined the light, they saw two big yellow eyes, and it scared them, not only because the eyes were so big, but they seemed to be 9 feet off the ground. Like, it couldn't have been a deer. It was enormous, and they all got scared. Also, the niece and nephew, Joni and Ralph, told me that a couple of days before they had been walking in the woods, and they said they saw a gigantic gorilla. They were scared. I knew them well. I believed them. I couldn't make any sense of how there could be a gorilla in the woods because gorillas don't live in New York. But in hindsight, I believe they saw Bigfoot, because if you had never heard a Bigfoot story and you saw one, you'd probably think it was a giant gorilla. So all these things were happening in 1964 in my neighborhood, and I believe we had a Bigfoot. Frank and I also had a nighttime sighting at his house. He called me over to the window when I was over visiting, and from his backyard, you could see miles and miles, all the way almost to Newport's. And there was a round object in the sky. This was nighttime. It would change colors, and it was just sitting stationary in the sky. We looked at it for quite a while. I even got binoculars, and we were looking at it, and it just didn't move. And then all of a sudden, it went poof and disappeared and appeared like 10 miles to the left, closer to us, like in an instant. It just like went poof, disappeared, and at the same time appeared. And we looked at each other, and we just shook our heads. That was just like another amazing thing we saw. I really believe that we are being visited by extraterrestrials. There's UFO believers, there's UFO skeptics, and there's UFO knowers. And I'm one of the third because I know what I saw.
I had an experience one morning. I was up approximately 4:30 a.m. getting ready for work. And I looked outside, and my bedroom windows overlooked some mountains in the Catskill Mountain Range. And I see a light green, almost like a mint green light or orb coming over the mountains. And I noticed it was flying so low that you could see the green from the object illuminated on a mountain. So I woke my ex-wife up from her sleep, and I said, honey, you gotta get up and check this out. It's pretty interesting. So naturally she wasn't too happy I woke her up, but she comes to the window and she looks out and she says, oh, well, that's interesting, but what do you think it is? And why did you wake me up? And I said, let's just keep watching it. And it slowed down and it sped up and it did a couple of zigzag like flying patterns. And she said, well, that's pretty cool, but I know what you're thinking, I was thinking it's not normal. And she said, but it's cool, but I'm going back to bed. And I said, come on, just give it another minute or two. And she did. And within a few seconds, it stopped and then shot straight up into the sky out of view. And then she looked at me with wide eyes and said, wow, that was crazy. I said, it was definitely crazy.
Having an interest in the paranormal, I started a group with my friend Fiona, who's a renowned psychic. And recently, Fiona, Frank, and I went to a cemetery in Red Hook. And in this cemetery was a very old cemetery. We were checking out gravestones. There was one of a Hessian soldier. There was a couple of built into the ground vaults. One of them, the doors were wide open. So we looked inside, and I had purchased what's called a spirit box. I had brought it along because we wanted to try it out. So we went in here inside this crypt, and there was actually human bones laying on the ground and a small coffin that belonged to a child because it was so small. And I could tell it was very, very old because modern coffins are rectangular. The coffins like 200 years ago were tapered where the feet there are much thinner, and they got bigger as you went up to where the torso would be on the body. But anyway, we were in there, and Fiona said there's a couple spirits in here. She can see them. And so I put the spirit box on, and the spirit box makes kind of like a fuzzy noise. And all of a sudden we heard a man's voice, but we couldn't catch what it said. So now we were paying closer attention, and all of a sudden the male voice said, "I'm in hell." And Fiona and I looked at each other, and she said to the voice, she said, "Well, you need to go to heaven." And a second later, that voice responded and said, "Not this guy." And we were just blown away. After that, that ended the conversation, but it was clear as day. And I even had recorded it on an EVP recorder. So that was like a really amazing experience. Fiona's got a gift. When I met her, we became really good friends right away. She calls me her twin. I'm 6'2", 250 pounds, and she's 5 foot and weighs 90 pounds soaking wet, but she calls me her twin. But anyway, because of COVID 2 years ago, my son said, well, we can't go trick-or-treating with my grandkids, so what we'll do is we'll get candy and toys, and we'll bring it to a cemetery, Tongor Cemetery, and we'll just hide it. We'll be respectful, and we'll hide the candy, and it'll be like a spooky environment, and the kids can run around and pick up the candy. So the day before we were going to do that, I was going past Tongor Cemetery, and I said, you know what, let me go in and check out the cemetery and find a part of the cemetery that would be a good place to do this. So I drove around, and I found the back of the cemetery. It looked really nice. It was a gentle slope down, and it looked like a good spot to do it. And all of a sudden, I don't know why, but a gravestone that was all by itself, all the way in the back of the cemetery by the fence, attracted me. I walked over to this gravestone. It was a relatively new gravestone, and it was the grave of a young girl, 17 years old. There was a beautiful epitaph on it that her mother had written, talking about "Forever will the wind be in your hair." And there was a photograph on the grave. The girl was a pretty young thing with long blonde hair, and in the photograph, she was petting a horse. So it was obvious that she loved horses and probably did a lot of horseback riding. And I don't know why, but it touched me. It almost brought tears to my eyes, and I was affected. Then I left. I took a picture of the grave, and an orb appeared in the picture. But anyway, that night, Fiona was coming to dinner. She's a vegetarian, so we had eggplant rollatini. My son picked her up, and when she came, she looked at me, and she put her finger up and said, "Come here." So I went over to her, and she said to me, "I connected with you today." She said, "You were very upset, and you were in a graveyard, and you were looking at the photograph of a young blonde girl with a horse." And when she told me that, it floored me because I hadn't told anybody that I'd been at that graveyard that day. Nobody knew, and she knew it. And that's when I really, really knew that she really had a gift. That was the most amazing thing, that she actually knew what I was looking at. So she's part of our group. We do little trips around New York State, going to places. We went to the park where Son of Sam used to have his rituals. We went up to Glens Falls, to Cantrell Park, which is the park that Nostradamus had said after Armageddon, the new world would start again. And he gave coordinates. And if you look at the coordinates, it brings you to Glens Falls, New York, which is pretty amazing because Nostradamus was in France and had never been to the New World. But that's the coordinates he gives. So we make little adventures, and it's a lot of fun. And it's really opened up my eyes a lot to the paranormal. There's things in this world that we don't know about.
If you've had a paranormal experience and would like to be a guest on the show, please contact us by going to myparax.com. That's myparaex.com. Thanks for listening.